Donald Trump has signed several executive orders after becoming president. Executive orders give the US president the power to enforce certain policies without the approval of their parliament. With their help, the president can manage the operations of the government. Trump made full use of this powerful tool as soon as he assumed office. In this video, we'll take a look at 15 important executive orders, which will give you an idea of how Trump's policies are likely to be in his second term. The first is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Once again under Donald Trump, America has exited the Paris Climate Accord. In 2017, during his first term also, Trump withdrew the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, a decision that was later reversed by Joe Biden. Now in his second term, Trump has again withdrawn the US from the Paris Agreement by signing an executive order. Donald Trump's views on climate change are well known. He considers climate change a hoax and refuses to accept that human actions are the primary cause of it. America is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. With its exit from the Paris Accord, whatever little global progress was being made in combating climate change will likely halt. Other countries will also question why they should fulfill their commitments, potentially deciding to prioritize development and burn fossil fuels. Additionally, the US will stop climate financing, meaning developing countries will no longer receive funds to mitigate or adapt to climate change. This makes Trump's policy clear. Nothing will be done to address climate change during his tenure. As a result, we'll move even faster toward the destruction of the planet. Second is national energy emergency. It is well known that Trump does not consider climate change an emergency. For him, the emergency is boosting the US fossil fuel industry. That is why he has declared a national energy emergency through an executive order. Under this, the environmental regulations introduced by the previous administration will be removed. The US, which was moving towards electric vehicles and clean energy, will now go back to traditional energy sources. Trump is aiming for record-level oil and gas production in the country. He wants to address the concerns of Americans suffering from rising inflation and energy costs by increasing production and lowering prices. While scientists worldwide are emphasizing moving away from fossil fuels because of the climate crisis, Trump is advocating for increased fossil fuel extraction to achieve energy independence for America. Obviously, the fossil fuel industry is pleased with Trump's stance, and energy stocks in the US are surging. So even as the United Nations continues to highlight the climate emergency, the US will move in the opposite direction and prioritize its energy emergency under Trump for the next 4 years. Third is withdrawal from WHO. Yes, you heard that right. Trump is taking the US out of the World Health Organization. Trump is not at all happy with the WHO. According to him, the WHO did not handle the COVID-19 pandemic properly, failed to implement necessary reforms in time, and came under pressure from China. Therefore, under Trump, the US will withdraw from the WHO, a process that will take 1 year. This is a big blow for the WHO, because around 18% of its funding comes from the US. The US exit will cause significant financial losses to the WHO, making it difficult for the organization to continue its health programs and address global health challenges due to a shortage of resources. The WHO has expressed disappointment over the US decision. It stated that staying associated with the WHO provides access to its global health network, shared information, and vital data, enabling countries to manage diseases more effectively. However, it is clear that these arguments will have no impact on Trump. He has already made up his mind. Back in July 2020 also, he initiated the process of taking the US out of the WHO. But the Biden administration halted it in January 2021. Now in his second term, Trump is determined to complete the work he couldn't finish in his first term. Fourth is ending birthright citizenship. Trump is known for his tough stance on immigration. It was expected that he would implement strict immigration policies after coming to power. And this is exactly what is happening. Now if a child is born in the US, the child will not automatically receive citizenship as before. If it is found that, at the time of birth, the child's father was not a US citizen or a permanent resident, and the child's mother had entered the US illegally, the child will not be granted US citizenship, even if born on US soil. Then, if the child's father was not a US citizen or a permanent resident at the time of birth, and the mother was in the US on a temporary visa, such as the student visa, work visa, or tourist visa, in this case too, the child will not automatically gain US citizenship. You might be aware that some non-US citizens previously came to the US with the intention of having their child born on US soil. so that the child would automatically become a US citizen. This practice, often referred to as birth tourism, will no longer be possible under this new policy. Trump's executive order has effectively put an end to birth tourism. However, many lawsuits have been filed against this order on the grounds that it violates the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution, which states that anyone born or naturalized in the US is entitled to US citizenship. Further, there is a landmark 1898 US Supreme Court judgment that ruled a child born on US soil automatically receives US citizenship, regardless of whether the child's parents are US citizens. However, for now, Trump has attempted to change birthright citizenship through an executive order. To protect this constitutional right, many lawsuits have been filed. The outcome of these lawsuits will determine whether Trump's executive order remains valid. It is important to note that the executive orders of the US president are subject to judicial review. Federal courts in the US have the authority to examine presidential executive orders to ensure they comply with the laws and constitution of the country. The court's decision will ultimately decide whether birthright citizenship is upheld or it ends. Fifth is national emergency on the US-Mexico border. Yes, to prevent illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and security threats, Donald Trump has declared a national emergency on the US-Mexico border. As a result, the security of the southern border of the US will be increased. 1,500 additional troops will be deployed there, and efforts will be made to stop illegal crossings. The Remain in Mexico policy has been reinstated. This policy requires Mexican individuals seeking asylum in the US to submit their application and wait in Mexico until the process is completed, rather than entering the US. Trump first implemented this policy during his initial term in 2019 and has now reinstated it after returning to power for a second term. Now, what is the problem with this? See, when would someone seek asylum in another country? When that person was being persecuted in his or her own country, wanted to escape war, internal conflict, violence, or let us say was a climate refugee. In such cases, he or she would apply for asylum in another country. Authorities would investigate the claim, and if found false, it would be rejected. However, if the claim was genuine, the individual would be granted refugee status and allowed to legally stay in that country. But under Trump's executive order, asylum seekers must now wait in Mexico while their claim is processed, regardless of how dangerous the conditions they face there might be. This has raised issues such as human rights violations, risks to vulnerable populations, and accusations of overreach of power. This executive order is expected to undergo judicial review, but for now, it remains in effect. Sixth is lifting the TikTok ban. The Chinese app TikTok is very popular in the US, with almost half of the American population using it. TikTok's parent company is ByteDance. There were concerns that sensitive data of Americans could be collected through TikTok. To address this, a law was passed under the Biden administration requiring ByteDance to either sell TikTok to a US company or face a ban in the US. TikTok challenged this law in court, but the US Supreme Court upheld it. Following this decision, TikTok ceased its operations in the US. This move frustrated many users, leading to memes circulating on social media. Concerns were also raised about freedom of speech and censorship. Many influential figures also reached out to Trump, urging him to lift the ban. Recognizing TikTok's significance in the US, Trump issued an executive order suspending the ban for 75 days, giving ByteDance additional time to find a US buyer. Trump also suggested a joint venture model in which ByteDance would sell 50% of TikTok to a US entity and will then gain the necessary permits to continue operating in the country. He even proposed potential buyers, tech entrepreneurs such as Oracle's CTO Larry Ellison or Elon Musk. So Trump's approach is to allow TikTok to continue its operations in the US while addressing national security concerns through partial US ownership. Seventh is the establishment of DOGE. A new department called DOGE, the full form is Department of Government Efficiency, has been created under the President's office. From the name itself, it is clear that its purpose is to enhance the efficiency and productivity of the government. Elon Musk, who played a significant role in Trump's victory, will lead this department. It is believed that through his technological expertise and innovation, he will upgrade the country's IT systems, reduce inefficiencies in bureaucracy, and cut unnecessary government spending. Initially, Vivek Ramaswamy was also expected to co-lead DOGE with Elon Musk, but he suddenly stepped down, leaving Musk as the sole leader of the department. Concerns about a conflict of interest regarding Musk's leadership have been raised, but that won't have any impact on Musk's position. Over the next 4 years, Elon Musk's influence will grow exponentially. 8th is America First trade policy. We already know that Trump wants to prioritize America's economic interests. He aims to address America's trade imbalances with other countries. This is why he issued an executive order to identify the reasons for these trade imbalances and provide instructions to fix them. Remember the date February 1, 2025. From this day onwards, additional tariffs may be imposed by the Trump administration on imports from China, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. Donald Trump had taken a protectionist stance during his first term, and he plans to maintain the same approach in his second term. He has made it clear that he wants to reduce trade deficits and increase domestic production. Now it remains to be seen to what extent he implements these protectionist measures. Any steps taken by him could disrupt global supply chains, lead to trade wars, and in the short term, force American consumers to pay higher prices for goods. While shielding domestic industries from foreign competition may seem beneficial, domestic industries will not revitalize immediately. It takes time. Until then, American consumers may face issues like shortages, higher prices, less variety, and lower quality of goods. Other countries could also take retaliatory measures, leading to trade wars and negatively impacting economic growth. Additionally, a new government agency is being established called the External Revenue Service. This agency will collect tariffs, duties, and revenues from foreign sources, which will be used to fund domestic programs. Currently, the Internal Revenue Service manages domestic tax collection, but the External Revenue Service will handle international trade-related collections. This agency aims to generate revenue from foreign sources to fund domestic initiatives without increasing internal taxes. Parliament's approval will be required to create this new federal agency. Since Republicans currently have a majority in both houses, Trump will likely face less difficulty getting approval. However, its effectiveness is being questioned. While tax cuts may benefit the public, imposing tariffs on imports will make goods more expensive. Rich people will not be affected due to their greater purchasing power, but higher consumer prices will negatively impact lower and middle-income households. 9th, strict definition of gender. President Trump has signed a controversial executive order, under which the US government will now recognize only two genders, male and female. This order adheres to the traditional binary framework of gender, meaning that the gender assigned at birth will determine an individual's official gender identity. For instance, if someone is assigned male at birth, they will be officially recognized as a man. If assigned female, they will be recognized as a woman. The US government will not take into account how individuals identify themselves. This includes those who do not conform to the strict male-female binary, such as people who are non-binary, genderqueer, or identify with other gender identities. From now on, the US government will follow only the traditional binary understanding of gender. All federal agencies have been ordered not to recognize any gender identity other than male or female. Policies and documentation must be revised accordingly. Further, the policies of the previous administration that supported transgender rights will be stopped. For example, the X gender mark will no longer be allowed on US passports. The sex assigned at birth will be the only gender reflected on official documents. This executive order has sparked significant backlash. Critics argue that gender identities are diverse and deeply personal. According to them, it is unjust to force individuals who identify as genderqueer, gender fluid, or transgender to adhere to the traditional gender binary system. Additionally, steps like stopping the promotion of gender transition concepts within federal agencies and abolishing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs will lead to increased discrimination and marginalization of transgender and non-binary individuals. 10th is ending work from home. Work from home has become quite normal since the COVID pandemic. However, this will no longer be the case in the US. Trump has signed an executive order requiring federal employees to return to full-time, in-person work at their workplace. Exemptions will be granted in specific necessary conditions, but most employees will no longer have the option to work remotely. The size of the workforce will also be reduced. Through these measures, the Trump administration is aiming to achieve higher productivity and efficiency. However, workers are anxious about sudden changes and concerns regarding job stability. The morale of employees who prefer working from home will decline. their expenses will increase as they now need to travel to their workplace, invest in professional attire, and face higher childcare costs. Maintaining work-life balance will become more challenging than before. Unions are filing lawsuits to protect workers' rights. However, until a court decision is made, employees who wish to keep their jobs must report to their workstations and comply with the new rules. 11th, Capitol riot pardons. More than 1,500 individuals involved in the Capitol Hill riot on January 6, 2021 have been pardoned. According to Trump, these individuals were merely protesting against a rigged election. However, since many police officers were assaulted during the riot, numerous people, including law enforcement organizations, have criticized these pardons. They argue that this act glorifies illegal behavior, devalues the sacrifices of law enforcement officers, and could encourage others to engage in unlawful actions in the future. Many believe such actions undermine public safety, but their beliefs won't bother Trump. He is very clear on this. Those who support him are being given concessions, while those opposed to him are facing strict actions. For instance, Trump has revoked the security clearances of more than 50 former intelligence officials by signing an executive order. If you recall, emails found on the laptop of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, suggested that he introduced his father to a Ukrainian energy official, raising questions of conflict of interest. More than 50 former intelligence officials initially linked this laptop story to a Russian disinformation campaign. However, it was later confirmed that the laptop story was authentic. Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter Biden, but Trump has now revoked the security clearances of these intelligence officials. Most of them are retired and no longer hold active clearances, but through this executive order, Trump has sent a clear message about his stance towards his adversaries. 12th is reinstating vaccine objectors. Many US military personnel refused to take the COVID-19 vaccines and were dismissed from service by the previous administration. Donald Trump now plans to reinstate more than 8,000 such military personnel. According to Trump, it was unfair to expel them solely for not complying with the COVID vaccine mandate. So he will reinstate them with full back pay. Remember, Trump needs troops to secure the US-Mexico border? Connect the dots. Anyway, health experts argue that this decision could set a precedent where troops may disregard medical requirements in the future. This could negatively affect troop health and readiness. Regardless, Trump aims to overhaul the US military in his own way. Reinstating and compensating vaccine objectors is a part of his broader initiative. 13th, honoring American greatness. Trump has signed an executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. The US Coast Guard and the state of Florida will now use the term Gulf of America in their official communications. However, this name has not yet been recognized internationally. Other countries and international bodies have not adopted this new name. Currently, only the US uses this new nomenclature. The President of Mexico stated that, while the US may have changed the name for itself, for the rest of the world, it remains the Gulf of Mexico. The International Hydrographic Organization has also not adopted this new name. Additionally, Trump has renamed North America's highest peak, Denali, as Mount McKinley. Denali, located in Alaska, is an indigenous name, meaning the High One. In 1897, this peak was named Mount McKinley after America's 25th President, William McKinley. In 2015, the Obama administration restored its indigenous name Denali. Now Trump has reverted it to Mount McKinley through an executive order. Then earlier, Trump expressed a desire to take back the Panama Canal, although he has not yet signed any executive order related to this. Further, while signing the executive order, Trump also reiterated his desire to acquire Greenland. He emphasized that Greenland is crucial for America's internal security and argued that controlling Greenland is essential to counter Russia and China's influence in the Arctic region. In response, Greenland issued a strong statement, reminding Trump that it is not for sale. Trump has previously stated that he might use military and economic force to acquire Greenland, which remains a matter of concern for Greenland today. 14th, lifting sanctions against Israeli settlers. Israel captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan during the Six-Day War in 1967. Subsequently, Israeli citizens settled in the West Bank. Under international law, these Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are considered illegal. The United Nations and the International Court of Justice also deem these settlements illegal. However, these settlers have the support of the Israeli government. Reports of settler violence against Palestinians surface regularly. In response to such incidents, the Biden administration imposed sanctions on Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank. Now, Trump has issued an executive order lifting the sanctions imposed on these far-right Israeli settlers. Naturally, Israel's far-right leaders have welcomed this move. On the other hand, Palestinians are deeply concerned, as US support may lead to an increase in attacks on Palestinian villages, destruction of their properties, and physical assaults by Israeli settlers. Even reports of violent attacks emerged shortly after Trump lifted the sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office has also expressed concern over renewed violence. Thus, the fears of Palestinians are justified. Israeli settlements will now expand further. 15th, strict sanctions on Cuba. Former President Joe Biden wanted to remove Cuba from the US state sponsors of terrorism list. In 2021, anti-government protests erupted in Cuba, during which more than 550 people were arrested. Joe Biden reached an agreement with the Cuban government. If they release these political prisoners, the US would reduce sanctions and remove Cuba from the state sponsors of terrorism list. Around 150 prisoners were released as a result. However, Donald Trump later reversed the Biden administration's decision, keeping Cuba on the state sponsors of terrorism list. Under Trump, stricter sanctions will be imposed on Cuba. The Cuban president has criticized this move. Alright, so these were the 15 important executive orders that Trump signed as soon as he took office. I hope this has provided insight into Trump's policies. That is all for this session. Thank you for your time.